Have you heard of orthorexia? Perhaps it's something that you're wondering if you're struggling with too. In this video, I share my raw and unfiltered journey with orthorexia. I share the telltale signs and how my recovery unfolded. I really hope you find this helpful and encouraging in your journey too. I'm Lara, psychologist and food freedom coach, and I can help you create a healthy and happy relationship with food without guilt or emotional eating. I hope you're enjoying my videos and getting loads of value from them. If you are, be sure to hit the like button, subscribe to my channel to join the tribe, and hit that bell to be notified every single time I post a new video. Side note here, if you are feeling overwhelmed and out of control around food, be sure to sign up to my Food Freedom Masterclass. All the details to register are in the links below. Before we dive in, I have a question for you. Have you ever obsessed about clean eating? I want to start my video with a trigger warning. I am discussing my experience with eating disorders in this video. So what is orthorexia? So it's not actually a formally recognised eating disorder yet, but it's basically an unhealthy obsession on eating in a healthy way. Yes, eating nutritious food is good for you, but when you have orthorexia, you obsess on it so much that it damages your well-being. And whilst I was in it personally, I did not recognise this as orthorexia. It's only now looking back that I can see it for what it really was. At the time, I really just thought that I was eating well, eating healthily, and I thought it was good for my long-term health. But I was very wrong. So my experience with orthorexia started in around my mid-30s and lasted for maybe about 3 years. I'd actually previously really enjoyed several years of food freedom after recovering from bulimia in my early 20s, but that's a story for another time. My orthorexia started soon after I'd had my children, and I was struggling with some body image issues after going through pregnancies and that whole idea that is really pushed onto women about get your pre-pregnancy body back and 9 months up, 9 months down and you're going to bounce back. I felt this huge pressure to get back to looking like I had before I'd had babies. But since I had suffered from bulimia back in my 20s, I knew that I never wanted to diet again because dieting is what triggered my eating disorder back then. So here I am wanting to get my pre-baby body back and knowing that I would never diet again. But what I didn't realise is the path that I went on was basically a diet in disguise. It was wellness culture that totally sucked me in. I fell for everything, hook, line and sinker. I was following several influencers that were telling me that in order to be healthy, I needed to eat in a certain way. And that often meant organic, gluten-free, eventually I was dairy-free, and absolutely no sugar. They also used a lot of pseudoscience to support their claims, so it made it very believable to me. And as I started on my clean eating regime, I started to get so much positive feedback. People telling me that I'm so disciplined, don't I eat so healthily, aren't I looking good, aren't I glowing? It was very alluring, except that by now my diet was even more restricted than it had ever been, even when I had been suffering from eating disorder in my 20s. And then to add to this, every few months I was doing like a cleanse where for a whole month I would have a really restrictive diet. I was calling it an elimination diet where I would cut sugar, dairy, soy, caffeine, alcohol, gluten from my diet, all in the name of health, except it wasn't healthy. It was messing up my relationship with food. I was starting to miss social events because I was scared that I was going to be around food. My mental health was suffering. When I was going out to restaurants, there was hardly anything on the menu that I could actually eat. It was all so disordered, but I just couldn't see it. Eventually, and thankfully, I started to have these aha moments that made me wake up to the disordered behaviour that I was engaging in. It was when I started to feel embarrassed about the long list of foods that I was sending to people ahead of dinner parties and saying, these are the things that I can't eat. I was also starting to notice some binging behaviour creeping back in, but it was only things that were quote unquote healthy. So I would find myself wanting to eat a whole tray of sweet potato brownies because I thought they were healthy, when probably actually, if I'd just eaten a normal brownie, I probably would have just had one. And then missing out on social events because I was so worried about being faced with food. And all of these little episodes started to remind me of that extreme behaviour that I'd been through in my 20s when I was bulimic. Eventually what I realised is that my old eating disorder had morphed into what was now orthorexia. But what were the signs? So just in case you're wondering whether this is something that you're experiencing too, I thought I'd give you several things I think were signs that I indeed had orthorexia. So number one is very rigid food rules. My food rules were so rigid. I was always trying to eat perfectly, and perfectly for me at the time was always organic. It had to be gluten-free, dairy-free, no sugar. And alongside that, I also wasn't eating the sugar in fruit. So grapes, red apples, bananas, they were all on the not allowed list. And I had to stick to these food rules, otherwise I felt like I'd failed. So eating out, going to friends for dinner, going on holiday, those were all very stressful experiences for me. There was no balance at all, and honestly, I would cry inside when my kids came back from birthday parties and they told me about the cake and sweets that they'd eaten. And yes, I spent many years cooking my kids sugar-free birthday cakes. I mean, how disgusting. The second sign was getting overly upset when these rules were broken. I would feel very emotional, distraught, and upset if these rules were broken. I actually remember being on holiday and in a French supermarket and not being able to get organic and gluten-free, whatever it was I was looking for. And I actually burst into tears because I was so distraught about the fact that I wasn't going to be able to eat in that very rigid way. I felt I had failed myself and also failed my family because they weren't going to be eating organic food. The third sign is obsessing over food. I obsessed over food all the time. I would obsess over sugar-free baking. I would read the labels when I was out shopping. I would calculate grams of sugar in things like raisins. And I would only eat a green apple and not a red apple because it had less sugar in it. For goodness sake, I knew the amount of grams of sugar there were in a handful of raisins versus a handful of mulberries, and I would only let my kids have mulberries because there was less sugar in it. I was so obsessed about everything that went into my mouth and also what my kids were eating too. Hours that I spent worrying and obsessing. So the fourth sign was awkward social events or avoiding them altogether. So I started to avoid social events or completely rearrange them on those month-long cleanses that I was doing. Or if I was going out, I would endlessly worry about what I was going to eat. Sometimes I even called ahead to the restaurant to find out what was gluten-free, dairy-free, sugar-free on their menu. Or I'd sit there poring over menus, claiming that I had a gluten or dairy intolerance just so I could find something that I could eat. Awkward conversations with hosts about the lists of things that I wasn't able to eat. And the fifth thing was the impact on my mental health. The overall result was that all of this was so stressful. The constant worrying and obsessing, taking up all this brain space that otherwise could have been used on better things. So let me check in with you here. Have you experienced any of these signs? If you have, let me know in the comments below. And finally, I want to leave you with this question that I get asked a lot. Is recovery actually possible? Yes, of course it is. So I'm here now as a food freedom coach, having completely shifted all my beliefs and perspectives around food. It's such a far cry from where I was a few years ago. I would say one of the big things you can do to support your recovery is have a social media cleanse. So look at the accounts that you're following at the moment. Are there accounts that are obsessed about your look, that you have to look a certain way in order to be healthy, that has before and after photos, that demonizes certain foods? If that's the case, get rid and start following accounts that are much more broad in their approach. Follow accounts that are to do with food freedom and intuitive eating and health at every size. That's going to be so much better for your mental health. I promise you, it made such a difference to me. And I'm going to recommend 2 amazing books that really helped me on my journey. One is Body Positive Power, and the other is health at every size. And I've put the details in the links below. And if you are ready to make peace with food, then sign up to my Food Freedom Masterclass. All the information and details to register are in the links below. Check out these videos next for more health and mindset tips. And if you like this video, give it a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel, and please do share it with your friends. Bye for now.